right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the February 17th, 2026 office hours. The purpose of today's office hours is to walk everyone through how to register and to submit a letter of interest for the Rural Health Transformation Program. The purpose, again, is to gather that high-level information so that we can route applicants to the appropriate funding pathways. All of you are on mute, so please, if you have questions specific to the registration process and the letter of interest process, please make sure you put those into the FAQs. We have a team that will be posing those questions to Megan to answer, or we will be answering them in the chat. This session is being recorded and will be posted on the Department of Health website. I would also like to remind everyone that we have updated the Department of Health RHTP web page with new information. So if you have questions about your project, I would remind you to please familiarize yourself with our application that was submitted to CMS and the initiatives and the purposes of funding use. In addition, if you have questions that are not answered on that website, I'll put an email into the chat and you can send those project-specific questions to rhtp@alaska.gov. And with that, I will turn it over to Megan, and she will kick us off in the registration and letter of interest portal. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Heidi. And it just, I just clicked the share button, and it looks like I'm not allowed to share at this moment. So is there someone with admin privileges who can give me the power to share? While we are working on that, I will, okay, wonderful. Let's see here. Share this screen. So I believe you should be seeing the Rural Health Transformation Program page that on the State Department of Health website. And hopefully you're all familiar with this site. And if you aren't, it's easy to access by just Googling Alaska Rural Health Transformation Program. Once you're there, there is a button now, as of today, to register and submit your letter of interest. And so that is how you're going to access the form to submit your LOI. When you are on that, when you click that link, you will get to this page, which is our portal for all applications. And the first opportunity is going to be the Rural Health Transformation Program. And you have the option of just previewing the questions, which will be a PDF download. And that can be a great option if you are looking to collaborate on an application. One thing to know is that this version of the application includes all questions, including those questions that are only going to show up with certain form logic answers. And so when you're actually filling out the application, depending on how you answer, there may be questions here that you don't actually have to answer. And those should be fairly straightforward. There are things like if you click other, it'll ask you to fill out what you mean by other, right? So when you are ready to apply, you're just going to click the apply button, and that will take you to the place where you're going to sign up for an account. If you are new to us and you are ready to sign up and you need to create a new account, you're going to create the new account button, use the create account button, and then you're going to start by submitting organization information. And so your organization's name, your EIN, your phone number, and an address are what you're going to need to be able to fill out this form. You will then, and I'll just go ahead and start filling this out so that you can see what's going to happen. This is not quite right, but just so that I don't have to remember, we're going to and this will be useful because what is going to happen for those of you who may already have, someone else at your organization who has an account, you may end up getting a notification at this moment in the application process that says that you can't create the account because there's already an organization with that. And it'll give you an email address to email if you fall into that category. And we're already receiving emails from people who need help setting up an account. This just ensures that we don't get a million duplicate organization entries from a lot of different people. And so we've been responding to those inquiries as they come in. If you've already received that notification and you haven't received an email back yet, you'll get one shortly. Once you fill out your organization information, you're going to fill out the user information. You'll be asked whether you are the executive officer of your organization. If you are not the executive officer, it's not going to stop you in any way. You just say no, and that helps us with our administrative structure for the organization. It'll ask you to input your executive officer information if you are not the executive officer, and then you'll be given the opportunity to create a password. So I'm going to go ahead and log in to show you what this looks like. Oh, wait, no. I use a different, I'm going to use my personal. I'm going to log in so that you can see what it looks like. Oh gosh, of course, it's not working. One moment, let me just do this. Of course. Let me just pause here for a moment and switch to a different screen here so that, because I'm already logged in elsewhere. And let's stop share. Here. Okay, so when you get into the application, oh gosh, okay, you're going to click apply to this one. I'm going to apply again because I already submitted a test application. One of the questions we get frequently is whether you can submit multiple letters of interest. You can just click that apply again button when you are ready. And so what you're going to see are the fields that you're going to have to enter when you're applying for your application, for your letter of interest. And so you're going to need a project title, a UEI number, as well as let me just pause with the UEI number. You are going to need to be registered with sam.gov to receive any federal funding directly. And this letter of interest is an opportunity to receive federal funding to support readiness planning and implementation grants. And so we do need to ensure that you have a SAM.gov registration that is active to be able to move forward with the application. We've received inquiries about what people should do if they do not have the capacity to get the registration yet. And we're working on a pathway for that, but we don't have an answer right now. For the letter of interest, you will need to have your UEI. So if you do not have one in this moment, we recommend going on SAM.gov and starting the registration process as soon as possible. If you're not sure whether your organization has a SAM.gov registration, there is a link with instructions of how to figure that out. So all of that information is right here. We also have the single audit history, whether you have had a single audit in the last 5 years. So if you don't know, you can just let us know that you are not sure yet. And then you're going to share your total operating budget for the current fiscal year. Just a number, don't put a dollar sign. It is going to shoot you an error message if you put a dollar sign in there. We also want to know whether you are a tribally affiliated organization, and then what your primary organization type is. And so you'll have the opportunity to select from this list. If you select healthcare providers or other, then you are going to be asked to provide more information. And so healthcare providers include more details about what type of healthcare provider you are. If you fall into more than one category, you're going to select your primary category first, and then select all of the categories that you fall into next. If you only are one type, just select the same answer both times. This just helps with our ability to slice and dice the data later on. So we appreciate your willingness to click 2 buttons for that question. If you're a healthcare provider, you're going to be providing more information about what type of healthcare provider you are. And if you click other, you will get a question about the other kind of organization you are. You'll be asked whether your organization has a physical presence in Alaska. And then you can share more details about that physical presence. You can share that your organization is headquartered in Alaska, or if your organization has at least one office or brick and mortar location in Alaska. If neither of these is true, but you have at least one full-time staff member who's an Alaska resident, you can answer it that way. And there is also the option of saying that you do not have a physical presence in Alaska. If you say no, you will then be offered the opportunity to share more details about your connection to Alaska. Whereas if you say yes, then it's going to ask you where in Alaska your organization is located, and you'll have the opportunity to share more details about that. Next, you'll be asked about your service areas, so where your organization offers services. And you'll have the opportunity to select the specific borough or census area where your organization operates. If there are multiple, you're going to select multi-region, and then once you've selected that, you'll have the opportunity to select multiple regions rather than just one. If you do not yet offer any services in Alaska, you can choose the selection not yet operating in Alaska. Next, you're going to be asked for the primary contact for the project. This is important because if you are an organization that is submitting multiple letters of interest, you may have different primary contacts for each of those applications. The first question is going to be whether the primary contact is the person who is submitting the application. That's because you already provided a lot of contact information in the registration process, and we don't want you to have to answer that twice. So if you registered and provided your contact information, you can just say, yes, I am the primary contact. If you are logging in with somebody else's login, or if you are not the primary contact, if you have been delegated the responsibility of submitting the LOI by the primary contact, you're going to select no, and then you're going to have the opportunity to put in more contact details. Same thing for the fiscal contact. If that is you, you select yes. If it is not you, you select no. And if you select no, you will be asked to provide more contact information. Then you will be asked the geographic reach of the project. And I want to pause for a moment and just articulate that one of the other common questions that we get is whether people should be submitting separate LOIs for separate projects or whether they should do a single LOI with all of the projects included. And the answer is we want different LOIs for each project that you are submitting. And so, like I mentioned before, you have the contact information that's really about the primary contact for the project, which could be different within the same organization, but across different projects. And then you're going to be asked about project-specific information. Earlier, you were asked where your organization offers services. That'll be consistent across an organization's various LOIs if they have more than one. But then you'll be asked for the specific service areas of the project, which may be more specific, or it may be different from your organization's current service area. You may be expanding services into a new area. So this is a question about where your project is going to offer services. And again, you're listing the specific boroughs or census areas where you're going to be working. You'll be asked for the project reach, how many Alaskans are going to be served by the project. Your project may serve people in other states. That's not paid for by us. And so we're not asking you what the total reach is. We're just asking for in Alaska. And then what populations are going to be served by the project. And so again, you're going to be clicking every population that you're serving. Then you'll have the opportunity to share more details about how your project is going to improve access, quality, or sustainability of healthcare for rural, remote, or frontier communities. Those are all pretty quick questions to fill out. Next, you're going to get the opportunity to really provide more details about the project itself in a narrative format. So we want to know more about the opportunity, the problem or opportunity that you're looking to address, the approach, the outcomes that you're expecting, as well as information about how you think the project might become sustainable in the long run. We're also asking for risks or uncertainties associated with your project. And I would just share that it is worse to be a project that seems unaware of risks and uncertainties that it should be aware of than it is to be honest about the risks and uncertainties that you're facing. And so this is meant to be a transformative effort. and we expect there to be risks and uncertainties that are inherent with it. So please be open and honest about the risks and uncertainties that you predict. You'll then be asked to share more details about the project partnerships. If your project has partners involved, either you're going to be recruiting them or they're on board, you will have the opportunity to share more details about the partners that you have and the partners that you're going to be recruiting. Again, I want to pause here because another question that comes up frequently is how should partnered projects apply? And oftentimes the best way to tackle that is to have the lead partner be the applicant, and for that lead partner to provide either contracts or subrecipient awards to the partners involved on the project. But it can depend. There are some cases where it might make sense for partners to apply separately, particularly if the projects are not contingent on one another. If they are projects that could operate even if they're not both approved, it may make sense to apply separately. Finally, we're asking for the stage of development for your project, whether you're at concept formation, whether you've got a defined approach, or whether you are ready to launch the project. And so we have more details here to help you self-assess. This is your best assessment of where the project is. It is not necessarily going to be 100% aligned with the pathways of readiness, planning, and implementation, but it gives us a sense of where you think the project is. We ask for you to self-identify the rural health transformation initiative areas that you believe your project is advancing. And then the allowable uses for funds, which were aligned with the application that the Department of Health submitted to CMS. You'll be asked for the total duration of this project. And so it could be anything from in the 6-month range to more than 3 years. And then please share information about the project duration. So many of you may be aware that the state of Alaska has only been awarded officially the first year of project funding. And so we'll only be able to make awards for each award that they've received as a state. But we recognize that transformation doesn't happen overnight and that there may be projects that require multiple years or multiple phases to be able to complete. And this is your opportunity to share more about those plans related to your project. We then want to note the estimated funding range for your first year of funding. And so here are the ranges we have. Again, these are not associated with anything in particular, but they just give us a sense of what to expect through the letter of intent or through the letter of interest phase. And then you can share more about your future funding needs. So how much do you predict you might need in future years for the same project or a related project? Then we ask about your potential support needs. And finally, there's a certification before you submit your application. You can also save your application along the way, log back in to keep working on it. And so you have that opportunity. If for whatever reason you need to abandon the request, it's really helpful to actually click this button. For instance, if you are realize that you've created duplicate applications, you can abandon one of them, and that just removes it from consideration and avoids the confusion on our side of which application is the right one. So that is the detailed walkthrough of the application. Are there any parts, I'll just reach out to the Department of Health to ask, are there any parts that you think would be worth me walking through again before we get to questions, or are we good to move on to questions?
Megan, we have a lot of questions. The team has been furiously trying to answer the questions in the chat and the Q&A and in the chats that we are receiving. But I think a couple of questions, if you could review, there's a lot of questions from the UEI registration. And if an organization doesn't have a UEI, can they progress through the letter of interest, or do they need to wait until they get that UEI number?
Yeah, so if you're going to be in the process of registering, you can be working on your draft LOI while you're waiting for the UEI number to come back. You won't be able to submit your application, or sorry, your letter of interest until you have that UEI entered. And so you will be able to progress in the sense of drafting and filling out the rest of the letter of interest, but you won't be able to submit. And so there's 3 weeks until March 11th. And I would recommend getting the SAM.gov registration process started now.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. One more question for you, and then Emily also has been queuing up a lot of questions that she will ask you as well. But the next one is, do you prefer the mailing address or the physical address? Which one is best, and doesn't matter?
Yeah, we would prefer the mailing address. But honestly, if you receive an award, we'll be following up to check on all of that information anyway. And so there are no wrong answers at this point.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, Emily, what questions do you have?
Hi, Megan. I'm going to start with some softballs. Tell us about the character count. Does it include spaces? And some people are saying it looks pretty limited. Can you help put perspective a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So character counts do include spaces, and it is limited. And that's because this is a very early stage of the process. We are trying to get a sense of what is coming at us. And this is the way that we're doing it. There will be, if for those that are routed into the implementation phase as to provide that next stage of the application, those people will have the opportunity to share much, much more detail. We're trying to be as open as possible right now. And so the key right now is showing that this is aligned with the rural health transformation goals and purpose. It is not justifying the project at a detailed level. So that is why there are very limited character counts available right now.
Thank you, Megan. I want to jump a little bit into a series of questions we're getting about entities who are the lead, right? So how, I know you covered this a little bit, but I want to spend some more time on it because we have so many questions, I think, as organizations work together and partner, which is what we want. That's really exciting. but how do they think about completing the LOI process? And so one that I will start with is a single company allowed to submit more than one application if there are different programs being suggested? And is there a limit on the number of applications that an entity can submit?
Yes, organizations are allowed to submit multiple applications. Again, you're just going to click that apply button. Again, it'll mention that you've already submitted something or you already have a draft underway, and it will allow you to submit another one. You could also have different people from different parts of the organization submitting applications from different accounts. So either one of those is going to work. There's also no limit on the number of letters of interest you can submit. That being said, and the commissioner spoke to this during the first webinar, it's really important to be thoughtful about the full portfolio of projects that you are applying for at this point, because there is the possibility that you would be awarded funding for all of them. And we would really appreciate everyone apply for the portfolio that they would actually have the capacity to implement for every award, where every project given an award. The other thing to contemplate, I would say, is we're assessing capacity of each organization to implement the projects that they are submitting at a high level. But we're going to be looking at that full portfolio when assessing that capacity.
Yep. And Megan, I would just also add real quickly, Emily, again, this is a 5-year transformative effort. And I think there's a lot of eagerness by organizations to submit everything in the first year. And you need to just be thinking about pacing yourself. I'd really underscore what Megan said. What capacity do you have in year one to complete the work that you are proposing? And those are internal conversations that you need to have within your organization and with your community. This is about transforming the healthcare system. And so we hope that you, as you're evaluating this opportunity, are looking at the partners within your community and within your region, looking at how we can increase for better health outcomes. Again, year one is truncated. Year two will be right around the corner, and we'll be having the same process. So really be assessing, again, your capacity and what you're going to be able to achieve in year one versus year two and moving forward. Thanks. Back to you, Emily.
Yeah, thanks. So a couple of other questions that we're getting. So for partner projects, and Megan, I think you've talked about this, but I just want to make sure, because again, we're getting so many questions and I know this is key. For partner projects, should we submit a letter of interest for each partner, or should we submit a single letter of interest?
Thanks, Emily. I think that there are different kinds of partnerships that people are referring to when they talk about a partnership project. There's the kind of deep partnership where a project among the partners cannot be successful unless it is supported in full. And in that case, we recommend that the lead partner, a lead organization for the project, submit one LOI and list their partners. There are other cases where it may be a group of organizations that are really coordinating with one another and not necessarily deeply partnering as much as in the first example. And in that case, it may make sense for them to submit separate LOIs. Uh, I, I think that in a lot of cases, it's going to make sense for one organization to be the primary organization submitting a letter of interest.
Thank you. We've had some other questions, Megan, about when kind of related to letters of interest and budget. So one question that's just very administrative, the term fiscal contact is used in the sheet. Does that mean fiscal manager? How should people think about that contact?
Think about that contact as the person who is going to be following up if a check is not received, or it just basic administrative financial work.
Okay, sticking with the theme of budget, if we have a question, we are submitting letters of interest under our parent organization, UEI. Should we list the operating budget for the entire parent organization or just for our specific sites?
I think it would be useful to list the operating budget of the parent organization, as they are going to be taking financial responsibility of the project as a whole. And it will be helpful for us to assess the scope of that project budget in the scheme of the larger organizational budget.
And sticking with the budget theme, we're just going to go through those right now. Please elaborate on the total operating budget question. So is this current revenue? And again, I think we have some providers that are online, and so they're trying to think about how to think about that budget question in the context of their practices. And also, we'll follow up with that and ask some questions about confidentiality.
So we're asking about annual expenses that you're predicting, not annual revenue that you're predicting.
So the question about budget is really focused on the project and the program, less about the organization's budget. Is that a way to think about it, Megan? Or
there are two different questions on budget. And so early in the application, it may just be dizzying to scroll, so I won't scroll there. But early in the application, you are asked about your organization's operating budget. That is about the operating budget of the organization. We're talking about the organization's annual expenses, what you are predicting. In the later section, there is a question about the project budget for this first period, this first year. And so that is specifically about the project, and that is where you are just entering a range. We recognize that projects are at very different levels of development, and there may be some where a range is really all you have, an estimate, and there may be others that have very, very detailed budgets. We don't need the detailed budget yet, which is why we're not asking for it.
Great, thank you. I think another question entities have is how much of the information that's in the letter of interest would be held confidential, and how much information could be made public. And I know that that's, we operate as a public entity on our end, and so state information is generally available upon request. Megan, one thing that we typically note, and again, we'll have to think about this, is to identify information that you view as proprietary or confidential. If you could mark that in the letter of intent, that helps us identify that from the beginning.
Agreed.
Anything you would add or change to that answer?
No, I think that is useful framing. And I would say if you have specific concerns about confidentiality that you don't feel like you can address within the form itself, email us.
Great. So we had a question about audits, and a lot of questions about entities that may be required to do a federal audit, that may not be required to do a federal audit. How should they be thinking about that audit question?
The audit question is just giving us a sense of what your organization has done in the past. It is not going to determine whether or not we are open to providing an award that would be at the level of requiring a federal single audit. That question should be answered just based on the last 5 years, whether your organization has done a federal single audit. It is about what has happened in the past. It's not about whether you will be doing one in the year to come or whether this project would trigger one. It is just about what has happened for your organization in the last 5 years.
Thank you. So now I kind of want to move into some of the timeline questions we have, specifically about projects that might span a greater timeline than the budget period for any given Rural Health Transformation Program award year. So let's say that an entity has a project that they foresee implementing in year 3. Should the letter of interest for that be submitted during this current window? I think there's a sense sometimes I hear from people that are like, we have to think about everything for the next 5 years and we have to make sure we send a letter of interest in now. And I know you've talked about this, but I just hear that so frequently. Can you remind people how they should be thinking about that?
Yeah, and I think that Commissioner Hedberg's earlier statement about submitting what you can accomplish in this first project year is really important here. We are not asking for letters of interest for all projects across all project years. We are just asking for this first year. And there will be future opportunities to submit letters of interest for later phases of the project, of this program. And so, no, to be very direct, if you have a project that you are hoping to do in year 3 of this program, do not submit a letter of interest right now. Please wait.
So along those lines, what about entities who might be submitting a letter of interest for a project that crosses multiple award years? How should they think about that in the context of this letter of interest process?
So here's where I will scroll to this section that is about the first year of funding needs versus future funding needs. We are interested, to the extent that you are aware of future funding needs, getting a high-level overview of what those might look like. But if you don't have them, it is fine to say that you don't have them at this point. So this future funding needs section is where you're going to articulate. If you have a very detailed budget already ready for all 5 years of this program, you are very welcome to share, again, at a high level, what that looks like in this section. But don't be intimidated if you don't have that yet. You can just let us know that, whether it's a range or you have no idea what your future funding needs are. What we're trying to get a sense of are what your needs are in this first year for this project.
So sticking along that theme of timeline, so is this the only time that parties will have an opportunity to apply for a letter of interest? Will there be future opportunities for entities to apply?
Yes, there will be future opportunities.
Okay. And how should people be thinking about the timeline right now? How does the letters of interest align with potential proposals for project implementations? In general, what does that time frame look like?
In general, we're looking at like the next phase of this process for the full implementation details proposal that will take place after this LOI, and we will be looking to make awards by this summer, spring, summer. And then the state is their award needs to be fully spent by October of 2027. And so as subawardees, you would be subject to that timeline as well.
Thank you. And I know, Megan, we're working closely to try to, I think the time frame we put on the past slides is like kind of April for readiness and planning as far as award, and then May for implementation projects. So we'll try to stick to that, right? But we know things shift, and we just want to share as much as possible with you as you're working to build those out, but also recognizing that we'll take the time we need to make sure we get it right. I want to stick a little bit with the timeline question. I think last one on that is, are there benefits to applying later in the LOI time frame, or are there benefits to like getting it in as soon as possible? What are your thoughts?
In this 3-week window, I would say that there are not really any advantage to submitting sooner or later, other than there are more details of the program being provided by CMS all the time. And so some of those may flow down over the course of this 3-week window. And if you are wanting to wait to see what emerges there, you could do so. But other than that, I don't think that there's any particular advantage to waiting.
So I want to move on to location, because we have a lot of questions, especially as people partner or their organization may be located in one area, but they have multiple organizations and other communities in the state. So thinking about location, for brick and mortar locations, do they need to put in full addresses for all of their facilities?
No. We're just looking for the communities where you are located. And so if it is an open-ended, that particular field is open-ended, whatever is the most efficient way to answer that and give us a sense of where your organization has a physical presence, that is the best way to answer. And so if that means listing community names, that'll work. If you're saying we operate throughout such and such region, that is fine as well. Do what is going to be an efficient use of your time, but give us a clear picture of where those are.
So another question back to the timeline. When submitting a project that we think is ready to launch, are we confirming that the project must be completed within that project period? So for this project period, that would have funds expended by September 2027.
So you are not confirming that at this time, but that is what you are planning for. So you are only submitting projects that you that would theoretically be able to be. I'm floundering on this one. Would somebody like to? Can I phone a friend? This answer.
Yeah.
Please, yeah.
My guess is that, so the way I would interpret it, if I was applying, right, is that really when we are asking for projects that are ready to go and ready to be implemented, again, those funds and those projects really do need to be completed within that budget timeframe. And for year one, it's September 30th, 2027. And I've seen a couple of questions about that. I would say, if you don't believe that your project can meet that time frame, that you may not be in the ready to launch phase of that right now. But we're not asking you through the letter of interest to definitively commit to that when you hit submit. But be aware that that is the requirement that we have for funding implementation projects in this budget year. And so if you're not ready to hit commit to that when you send today, right, then you'll need to be ready to commit to that if your project is selected for an implementation award. I wanted to jump back up real fast because this is technical. We've had a lot of questions about UEIs and people who are in progress. They're in the process of registering for a UEI. So how should they handle that in terms of the timing to submit a letter of interest and the timing to be fully registered with it to get a UEI?
So I would recommend having a draft in progress and then only submitting once you actually receive your UEI number. And if you, for whatever reason, are not able to finalize your SAM.gov registration ahead of this letter of interest cycle, there will be future cycles.
Okay, thank you. I want to also go down to a question about project caps because we've received questions about that. Is there a cap or a target range for individual project funding requests or guidance on what's considered an appropriately sized project?
There's nothing specific. It's going to vary a lot organization to organization. What I think is useful to keep in mind is that it is for this program, it is really important to be able to fully spend the first year of funds within that project period. And so you want to be mindful of that when thinking about the size of the project, right? How much are you actually going to be able to commit to spending within that window? And also keep in mind, this is a statewide program and that is supporting ambitious initiatives across 6 different areas. And so while there isn't specific project sizes, the total award that the state is working with. This is a statewide program. There's going to be a mix of different award sizes, and make sure that it is feasible within your organization to actually spend that. Is there any other guidance you would recommend from the state?
I don't think so. I think it's been well said. I know we have a few minutes left, but I want to get through just a couple more questions. So we have a question from someone who said, can a project consist of a bundle of projects? And I think really the question is, how do I think about submitting projects for an LOI, right? So if you're one entity and you have a project related to workforce, another one related to recruitment and retention initiatives, or capital projects, should each one of those be a separate letter of interest?
I think that the question is what projects can stand on their own. If a project can stand on its own, it is worth submitting as a separate project. But if it is interdependent with other projects, then it should be submitted as a single project with different components.
Great. We've gone through a lot. I know there's going to be just a series of more questions as people work through all of this. So if someone wants technical assistance with the application or the letter of interest, how can they initiate that support and who would be their point of contact as they move forward?
That is a question we're still looking at. And so I would recommend sending an email to RHTP at alaskacf.org. And when we have an answer to that, we will get back to you.
Megan, we also have some comments on, again, just going back to word count, just the word count. I think last week we said there would be 2,500. One of the boxes, the box that you have on the screen now says 1,500. It might be good just to refresh people. There's other boxes that say where there's more space for character count. And so there's a series of different opportunities to fully explain your project. I will say from my experience, more is not always more when it comes to word count. And again, we're really trying to get high level information from everyone and not require everyone to do a very, very deep dive because they may not be ready to do that. And we don't want to create extra work, right? But there are more opportunities within this letter of interest form to provide more information about your project.
Yes, 2,500 is the largest area, but there are different amounts depending on the question.
So we have kind of, I know we're almost at the end, but reporting and reporting requirements. We haven't talked a lot about those yet. We know that that's a really important component. I think one thing that I would share with this team is that as a state, we will be getting some more information from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services next week about reporting requirements, including reporting templates that we will need to be using and that subrecipient grantees will need to be using as well. So we will have a base for that we will begin sharing out when we get that information. So that is coming. But I just wanted to highlight that because I know that that is a really important point for a number of people on this call. So Megan, I think with that, we only have about 3 minutes left. Are there any closing remarks that you want to share, either you or the commissioner?
I don't have any, so I will hand it over to the commissioner to close us out.
Oh, Heidi, you are on mute.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Megan, for walking us through the registration and letter of interest portal. I would say that there's a lot of similar questions. Emily, you did a great job of sort of summarizing them. We tried to answer as many questions as we could. This is a recorded session. It will be posted on the Department of Health website. We are also going to have 2 more office hours next Tuesday and the following Tuesday from 12 to 1. I would just cue you in that on our website, it's called the Applicant Resource Guide. It says coming soon. It is something that we are developing right now, and it should answer more of the questions on if the award will be reimbursable, if there's going to be funding that's allocated by quarter. Again, these are all things that were under development. Remember that all of this work is in concert with CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And so this is a cooperative agreement. This is what it looks like when we are all working together. So thank you for your time today. We are at the top of the hour. And please scroll to the top and you can see the 2 email addresses. If you have questions on registration and letter of intent, please send those to the Alaska Community Foundation. If you have questions about your projects or specific to RHTP, please email rhtp@alaska.gov. Take care. Thanks, everyone.